Hi and welcome to The Working World. I'm Gara Mendez.
And I'm Jamie Lingham.
Jamie, we just had the pleasure of speaking with Justine Moyle, director of the recently released movie Tall Poppy, and an active member within the TV and film industry within Australia. What an amazing individual.
I tell you what, Karen, considering the amount that we as a population have consumed media, TV, movies, etc. I mean, this is one of the people who are behind bringing us that entertainment, but also just getting an insight into how the industry is managed during COVID, with lockdowns and with everything that it has to do with COVID. It's been it was a very great conversation.
Yeah, it was interesting about some of the alignments with, I guess, if you compare it to the corporate world, like some of the things that Justine pointed out, and some of the approaches that they're actually taking is a little bit more innovative around rapid testing, for example. I'm not aware of any organizations from a corporate perspective that are doing that yet, but yet they're, from a speed to product and production point of view, they've already moved to that kind of approach, and then pivoting, around their contingent labor, using crews in local locations rather than taking their own crews. There's a lot of synergies, but there's a lot of things that they're doing that are ahead of the game. And so there's a lot of learnings in there, I think, for a lot of HR mobility practitioners, just around managing mobile labor, and also from an entertainment point of view too. Who doesn't love that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not the all or nothing approach that, we've sort of been expected. There was a lot of flexibility in there.
Yeah.
So no, great. I think it's well worth the watch. And even just to hear Justine speak and what she has to say about certain things, I just think the show's fantastic.
Yeah. Enjoy it, guys. See you next time.
Okay.
Hi, Justine. Welcome to The Working World and congratulations on Tall Poppy. It was a fantastic movie.
Thank you so much for having me, Karen, and I am so pleased that you enjoyed the film. I'm very excited always to hear that people get a kick out of watching my work. Lovely to see you.
It was fantastic.
And Justine, how's it all going? I mean, how has the film industry been with COVID?
I mean, it's a big question. I guess, it's been, in some ways, Australia's had a really good opportunity with COVID over the last year because everything was really bad in the rest of the world. So everyone came here to film. Having said that, we've had lockdowns left, right and centre, which causes havoc with scheduling and people being involved. I think even recently, Natalie Portman was in Australia and that got canned because she decided that she wanted to not be involved as things got into lockdown here. And on the other side, I guess, my film came out literally the weekend that New South Wales got locked down in cinema. So we had a somewhat of a cinema release, but we definitely lost out financially with cinema at that point and had to, not necessarily, we were always going to pivot to online, but that opportunity went very quickly. So we had to figure out some other ways to make sure people knew about the film and make a little bit of cash at the back end as indie filmmakers. So there's been positive and negatives, and it's just a massive minefield of, like, particularly when you're on set, figuring out how to act in a safe manner.
Yeah, it was funny when the pandemic first started, you did see a lot of those big Hollywood names kind of start to come back to Australia and promote Australian film a lot more, which was great to see. But then as it went on, it kind of went a little bit quiet. So I suspect that they all returned back to where they came from, be that Hollywood, as you're right, as we kind of went into more of a lockdown.
Yeah, absolutely.
How's the industry on that point, though, I guess, evolving and moving along the lines of the vaccination conversation? Because as we know, many of the industries now are starting, like construction, for example, are starting to mandate the requirements for vaccinations for their workforce. What's the discussion for the film industry and TV industry?
Look, we're all just discussing it at the moment, essentially, as to what we're going to do moving forward, and it will come down to, like, what the states mandate, and then what individuals do or individuals and individual companies decide to do. So at the moment, like, moving forward into shooting, we'll ask about vaccination, but we're not able to. We obviously we're not going to discriminate against someone who hasn't. So in that case, it's like proof of negative tests. At the same time, like we're actually going into a shoot in a couple of weeks in a live venue, and you have to be vaccinated in order to enter that venue. So while we as the production company I'm working with at the moment, we have our COVID safe policy. We won't be asked about vaccination. It will be the venue that asks about vaccination. And it really depends. You know, bigger productions can potentially mandate it or make a decision that they're like, you have to be vaccinated. As smaller companies make those decisions, you could potentially lose crew who are unable to, for whatever reason, or I think overall, a lot of people have been working through this whole time, and the people that I know and speak to are generally like, everyone's just like, yep, sure, vaccinated, it's no problem. And they have to be tested, they're getting tested all the time because they're working. And it's very much at the moment, like, because we're transitioning, is seeing what other people are doing and then making decisions based on that. I mean, large companies like Amazon, I know they were testing every day or every 3 days. Whether they decide that, and then they are governed by Amazon in the US.
Of course, yeah.
So their policies will come through, and sometimes they were like over the top, because back when Australia wasn't in the middle of a crazy lockdown, the things that they were asking people to do were kind of over the top compared to what was happening in Australia. But because they were an American company, that's how all the locals had to work on it. So it's it's probably much the same as most industries. Smaller companies will make decisions based on what's best for them and their shoots, and larger companies will just make a huge sweeping statement. And the thing I think with vaccination is you have to have your workplace safe for everybody. So on that grounds, I guess that's how people will move forward. It's like, well, if you're unvaccinated and you're dealing with lots of people, then maybe you need to be in a different department or not on set, and we'll have your assistant step in for you. Something like that.
Sure. Yeah. Makes sense.
Talk about coming in with the big question to start off with, Karen. I think that, this whole vax and anti-vax, absolutely. I think, we've seen a lot of NBA players who have come out against the vaccine, and who the NBA's decide to move on without them. And I just wonder, obviously you've got your own challenges. It's a good point about that, you aren't mandating the vaccine, but when you go to a venue like hospitality venues, everyone in there must be vaccinated. So that's a really good point. But what I was curious about, given technology these days, can you, or do you think the industry would actually turn around and say, well, hang on, I can green screen this person in? I think that there was the ad that was with Kim Kardashian and Magda. I think there was talk that a lot of that was green screened, right? So do you think that you get to a stage where you say, okay, let's green screen that actor in? So I'm just saying Johnny Depp, right? We'll throw him in there. He probably doesn't want to get vaccinated, right? He sort of seems to be that sort of, actor, and which is fine, but he's a bankable actor. So do you get to the stage where you start to green screen these people in? How do you cater for that topper level? That's good English. The higher level.
The higher level. I guess when you're dealing with big name actors, and that has a huge impact on, I guess, the film or the ad or the TV series, they'll make it work. Green screen is something that you can do. What also can happen is, and I don't know if you've noticed it in some of the TV shows that are happening that are coming out from the US, they actually social distance on the show. You just don't, they've shot it in a way that you may not necessarily notice. Or I've noticed The Bold Type, when that came out, and one of the characters was like leaving, and they were like, bye, like there was no hugs. And it was only because I was aware of it that I knew that was what was going on, but that they stood out. So maybe in that way, I think if a production wants a big name actor, they'll just find a way to bring them out and isolate them on set in a way that means that it will work. Green screen is one thing. It just depends on what they're doing, I guess, in terms of the cost of that, and like comping in versus building a set and having people like in one room and remote monitoring, and so they're further away. Those are the kinds of things that people would do. And that's actually something in advertising where basically we've been saying, no one who is not, anyone who isn't essential to that production going ahead cannot be on set. So even though you might have a client and an agency, they will remote monitor so they can see what's happening, but they're sitting at their desk like we are right now watching what's going on, because it's reducing the number of people, the number of exposure and that type of thing. So it's those types of things that people are starting to take on board, I guess, in that way.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you mentioned that, you know, and it's one of those things when you know what you're looking for, you can pick it up, right? And you're seeing that social distancing happening on screen. I wonder whether you could tell us a little bit about some of the other approaches that the industry's had to take to pivot their, I guess, either filming or production practices to ensure that the COVID measures are safe and in place, so that they're still meeting those kind of deadlines.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this last lockdown, one of the things we actually had to do is, you know, this industry is notoriously bad at high expectations. And yes, we can do that and we can turn around, and that doesn't fit, so we'll just go to the shop and get it.
Yeah.
Can't do that in lockdown.
Yeah.
You know, and all the money in the world will not get you that blue t-shirt from Kmart in WA, because it's the only place that it exists, that you need specifically for that actor. Like you just can't. So our timelines had to change, which was actually really lovely, because for the first time in a long time, we weren't being reactive. We were like, well, actually, this is the time we need. And also, creatively, you want the best out of what you see on screen. But I guess it's a little bit as well of, while you said you really wanted that particular blue t-shirt, maybe this one will do the same thing. It's like learning how to compromise in a way that doesn't, people get fixated on certain things. So in that way, like, our timeframes changed for the better, which was really great. On set, in what we've decided to do moving forward, and this is again, it's not mandated, it's like mostly what the practice is. PCR test, which is your regular COVID test.
Sure.
48 to 72 hours before set, you need to have proof of a negative test. And also, a lot of productions, and what we're doing for the next couple of months, is rapid antigen testing. So you rock up on set, you get tested, you wait 15 minutes, you have to isolate in those 15 minutes. Once that test comes back negative, then you can go on set. The reason everyone arrives on set and isolates is that if you get your test and then you're hanging out with people and someone happens to get a positive, then you're shut down.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's like minimizing the risk as much as possible. So PCR test that's got a negative result 1 to 3 days before, rapid antigen testing on the day. We also have done questionnaires. We've been doing that since COVID. So before you, within 24 hours of the shoot, and we've done it like a Google online forms. So it's like, you know, at the moment, that point, it was, you know, it's changed a bit since then, but like, have you been overseas? Have you been in contact? Have you got any symptoms? You know, and then you sign off on that. So that's changed. So that's, and it makes people think through, and also you're just mitigating the risk as much as possible for having all those people in a smaller environment, making, you know, producers, directors, assistants, you know, a lot of the time it makes you realize actually who's essential, and particularly in advertising and film. I mean, film needs a lot of people, but also like, well, actually what can be done remotely, and what have we gotten used to, and what can we do without, and be, you know, finding economies of scale is really important. There was one other thing I think I was going to say.
Do you think some of those things that you just spoke about, Justine, will endure once life goes back to normal? So people will be less fussy about the t-shirt from Kmart. You know, the things that can be done remotely will be, or do you think the industry's going to revert back to that, I guess, that high level of expectation, if I can call that?
Yeah, I think it'll be a bit of both. You
Yeah.
know, I think it'll be finding a middle ground. I mean, I think COVID's going to be with us. Obviously, masks are on set for every single person.
Sure.
I mean, that got a bit lax before this last round. You know, everyone had them, but everyone had them you know, under their chin.
Drinking coffee.
Yeah, drinking coffee. that sort of thing. So I think it'll end up being somewhere in the middle, and I think we're in this for probably another couple of years. So I reckon masks will be on set for the foreseeable. And you know, the other thing, which I think is a really healthy thing in our industry, is that if I was sick as a dog, I would still turn up to set, because you cannot like miss out. You know, it's like so many people are relying on you to be there, and there's an awful lot of pressure, and it's like, and a lot of people are freelancers, so if they're not working, they're not making money. Now, like, nobody wants you anywhere near a set, even with a sniffle. So it changes that expectation around, like, and I think that's a bit of an Australian thing as well, like turning up no matter what. Like, you know, you've got to work, you've got to do the job. Whereas now we're kind of putting our health at the forefront of that and going like, I've got the sniffles, I can't turn up because I can't put those people at risk.
Yeah, I think that's gonna endure, hopefully, through the corporate world as well. Absolutely.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, just on that parallels of with the corporate world, you know, you're talking about the essential people that you're using for a shoot or for a project. Have you found that that's actually, number one, saved you money, and because of that money saved, has that given you the luxury of actually having a little bit more time to invest in things that will take a bit longer?
Not overly, because,
or is it costing you more? I suppose that's what I'm getting at, right? So you sit there and say, so I'm wondering, is my theatre ticket about to go up, movie ticket about to go up because the production time's longer and then the costs are blown out, or the fact you're actually reducing the number of people who are involved, does that offset the additional time?
No, I think overall, like at the moment, like all our kind of COVID extra costs are significant, you know, so testing, COVID marshals, the nurse to do the testing, the pre-time, like the admin that's taking in pre-production, like it just adds a whole layer of complexity that usually you don't really have time for. So no, not at this stage. And anything with big productions, like the cost of that testing is a lot. It's a huge amount. And the other thing with rapid antigen testing, which is really great, and I think actually I just heard on the radio that I think they're going to start selling them in Australia, like so people can have them at home and do them themselves, maybe the end of October or November, is really great, but it also has a higher chance of false positives. So there's like this constant like struggle between someone might have a false positive, and a couple of months ago you could do a second test, and if it was negative it was okay, but now that's changed to false positive, you must leave, you must go get a PCR test. And if that person happened to be around anyone, then that whole department could get shut down. So it's cost money as well, with the fact that if you've got bigger productions, you know, you've got 100 people on a crew that are turning up, you have to stagger your start times so that everyone's getting tested. So you have to pay for that time. And if someone happens to get sick and you're keeping everyone isolated so that the whole production doesn't go down, that department goes down. In terms of if someone happened to be positive and it was actually a positive test, then those people that were working with them were the ones that will be isolated, not the entire production. Yeah, definitely costs more money in the long run.
Never good.
Speaking of the favourite subject, money, we've seen, I guess, a number of arts bodies kind of come together and do videos and performances, I guess, virtually to, I guess, drive a lot of support around their industry during the pandemic. Has there been any other support initiatives, whether that's, I guess, government or industry-led, that you've seen across the film and TV industry to support those that can't perform?
There's been grants, like Create New South Wales have done grants and you have to apply for them, and they've been like 5,000, 10,000, and sometimes there's been more of those as well. You obviously have to fill out the criteria. So, and, you know, there's an encouragement of supporting those people, and, you know, and last year, I think everyone was really enjoying the online thing, and it's a way to support. This year, probably not as much, because I think everyone's just fatigued by the whole situation, to be honest, like both the artists and the people watching. Not controversially, but also not controversially, but on the flip side of that, and my film was I was very lucky. I was able to get JobKeeper last year, and the only reason I was actually able to kind of get my film into a good spot is because I was able to get JobKeeper and I had time to work on my creative work that normally wouldn't get paid. So, and I've spoken to a few friends who work in music, and it's like, actually, we're getting supported for the first. Creatives are getting supported if you fell into that category, that you could actually get JobKeeper, which was depending on how much you earn, and being a contractor versus being someone who, you know, might do contract work over 4 months as opposed to a freelance, like an ABN sole trader. But it was like actually a bit of a miracle for a lot of us that we got to get supported to be able to just create, because, you know, in Australia, we don't value the arts and we don't value how much that brings. You know, like me sitting down and writing meant that we could get a couple of $100,000 to finish the film, so we could employ all these, you know, up to 10 people and put a film out that talks about Australian culture. So I think it's raising the question at the moment of how important giving creatives at some point some support. France, Germany, those countries are so good at putting money into their creative industries, and see the end result of that is tenfold, whereas in Australia we don't get it.
I think Tina Arena was quoted recently for saying something very similar, or a bit more emotive anyway, but something very similar along those lines. And I guess, and in comparison to other industries like sport, for example, where either the financial or the general support is a little bit different.
It's a real beautiful and unintended outcome of COVID, right? Like the JobKeeper. And I've often thought, what is the quality of production is going to be like, you know, in a year's time when we go to the cinema? Will there actually be that Australian, you know, cinema? I mean, you're living proof of it. You've gone through, you've directed your film through a time that is actually, you know, where most people have been struggling with COVID. And I suppose if you look at where JobKeeper was and how that sustained the industry, have you found this year without JobKeeper people actually leaving the industry?
Well, yeah, you have to. It's not so much maybe leaving, but it's like, well, you can't do your work if you have to go and get a job. You know, whatever that, and a different kind of job. Like the point, it takes time. It takes time to be creative and write songs or come up with treatments. Like you need that, and you can't do that while you're working at a checkout. So, or coding online or whatever it is, that you do to survive, you know. And I think there's a bigger conversation around a universal wage that potentially, you know, would really help all of Australians. It's like if your rent's paid and food's on the table, you can still become, you can get things done and then create in order to then make more money and become a tax-paying citizen in a way that really value, you know, the community values and can actually make money. You know, it's like we want everyone to be self-sufficient and we want everybody to be able to earn a living and being a part of the community. And culture and art is what is how we create culture. It's how we get to look at ourselves. It's like storytelling is what we do constantly. And if we don't get a chance to reflect on that in any way, shape or form, we lose touch with who we are. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of years. And yeah, it's a shame. It's sporting events are awesome, you know, like they really are great for people and having something to look forward to. But the amount of support they got comparatively to the arts, you know, it's just not valued the same. It just simply isn't, and that's really unfortunate in our culture in Australia.
You can't bet on the arts, right?
No,
which is a terrible thing. I think that, you know, Australia goes through every time you put sport. There's always something to do with betting companies who put money into that, and obviously that's a huge tax, you know, or revenue earner for the government. But you're right, like there isn't that same sort of support in arts.
And it's actually, you know, it's the thing that got us through COVID is like, how many TV shows did you watch? Like how much music did you listen to? How many books did you read? Like these are the things that, you know, keep us sane. So
how many times did you binge a Netflix series? Like seriously,
a lot.
Back to back.
And, you know, and binging, and I, you know, there's so many ones that I binged overseas. I'm a huge fan of like Schitt's Creek and, you know, and light comedy, you know, like Parks and Recreation, but also at the same time, I'm starting to look at Australian content and making sure that's at the forefront of what we're talking about in terms of getting a chance to watch a series. So
for 1 second, because I find it quite interesting. So with the amount of time and I suppose space creators have had through COVID, particularly last year when JobKeeper was about, do you think that a lot of that content will be sold overseas or help the industry grow on an international stage and create revenue? Because, I mean, you think about it, if our iron ore's, sort of going down and our wine exports are going down, I mean, we have to start to, as a country, replace it, not just be a banana republic that has people just here for tourism, actually doing meaningful things. Do you see the arts as something that could actually step into, not fill the void, but contribute to that?
Absolutely. I mean, we have an incredible country in terms of the landscape, in terms of the opportunities, in terms of the space, and we have incredible crews. One of the issues, and my knowledge on the top line of this isn't great, is that in terms of the tax breaks, the government was giving overseas companies more tax breaks than our local production companies, which is, it's great that they're coming, but we should be getting just the same. It costs just the same amount, and we want to hear those Australian stories getting told. Like, there's no way that there's no reason why we can't have the next Parks and Recreation, as an Australian story, but also that translating overseas in terms of how that's translated becomes a different question around what the rest of the world is interested in watching. That comes down to creative concepts that translate, I guess. Australian cinema is awesome, and it's got like the quirkiness to it in terms of what makes that interesting overseas. Is a fine line. It's like on Office, The Office, it was a UK, it started out as the UK version, but the American one became
their own version.
It's like,
yeah.
How do you translate that in a way that works? We can definitely become a playing ground, and I guess that overseas productions coming here is important, and it brings a lot of money in and everybody's working, but so long as that doesn't impinge on the fact that Australian stories and drama and TV series don't miss out in that process.
So do you think that those kinds of challenges are going to be enduring for the TV and film industry moving forward? Or are you seeing other challenges coming up on the horizon that they may need to overcome in order to sustain content production and, I guess, airtime, especially if they're competing with international content?
Yeah, I mean, the problems have always been there when it comes to Australian production, and there's something on the table with documentary at the moment. The same thing, it's a tax break. Basically, documentaries like mine were made on the smell of an oily rag, and we weren't even eligible for the tax break because we didn't have that much money. But there's lots of other documentaries that do, and they're talking about taking that off the table, and that tax break means that those films get made for a couple of $100,000 or $500,000, or I think it's maybe $750 now. So that tax break, that's basically what pays the producers to make the film.
Sure.
So to see that those things are back on the table and in a bad way is disconcerting. I think, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of eyes have been on Australia over the last 2 years. Because everyone came back here, and Nine Perfect Strangers was just made, and that was meant to be a Californian location.
Did Byron some good credit?
yeah. So it's still meant to be California. It's not Byron in the show, but it's like, I was watching it going, oh, that's clearly Byron. But I don't know what the Americans would have.
Everybody was on Google trying to find the resort.
yeah. Actually, I know the resort. I know they're like a bunch of meditators. But to show that it's possible and that we can do it, and then we've got an opportunity to, I think, as things, it's an unknown what's going to happen with COVID, I guess, over the last couple of years. But people, they can get them out here, they can isolate them, and then they're like their own little bubble in a way that I don't think is as possible in other parts of the world. So that's still very appealing to production companies, and those tax breaks, and the dollar value makes a huge difference as well.
Good point.
Bit of a controversial question, but do you think that there's been a two-speed, I suppose, a two-class system with A-listers coming into the country and the way they've been treated, as opposed to other crew? So what I'm saying is, have you seen this sort of, there is talk about it in the media that Sacha Baron Cohen's out on a boat with Natalie Portman or whatever. I don't know. I think there was a media article about that a while ago. But sorry, Isla Fisher. Exactly. Well, that's his wife, right? So, but do you think this sort of stuff has been going on over the last 12 months? There has been preferential treatment above and beyond what the local cohort is getting?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And that's because they bring the money, but it's not just the celebrities. It's like we find out about that because they're celebrities and actors and they're well known, so we know that. But anyone with money wouldn't have to quarantine in a hotel. Having said that, I know a very high profile actress and her husband, who's a director, and their kids actually did quarantine in a hotel, which really shocked me because they're very high profile, and I was like, what? They had to do that? Well, good on them, that they did do that, as opposed to, anyone else who got flown straight into their, mansion. I think also, from what I understand, they're all paying for that themselves. Potentially, or maybe the productions are paying for it, like the Australian government's not paying for it, or they're having to pay for the security. Like, it's not, they're willing to pay that. So I guess, and those who work on big production sets know that, like a good friend of mine was on the recent Marvel sets. And, she was like, when I found out what they were getting paid, and like, we're getting on set at 6 and they're not getting, like, their call time is 6, they don't get there till 8:30. It's like the disrespect that shows the people that are trying to make this good, make this a good working environment for you, is very frustrating. But they're just living in a different world to us.
So if I could take that one step further, do they still follow all the same COVID protocols?
Yeah, absolutely. They would have to. I mean, who's to say that, there was rumors about, in New South Wales, when the Northern Beaches went down last year over Christmas, and that was because someone got out, that was someone who either had a lot of money, or a celebrity or whatever it was. And I wouldn't be surprised. It's like, but yeah, you still have to do all those things. And I know that, like, I believe, and again, this is hearsay, and I think it was in the news that with Natalie's show in Australia, that she was the one that was going to be exposed because she's not wearing a mask. So she was like, it's too much of a big risk for me to be the one that could be exposed, and I'm not willing to do that right now.
Yeah,
so that
personal decision. Yeah.
So no love scenes, no love scenes through 2020, 2021.
Yeah.
That's it. You've got to expect any of this fireworks. That's all off the table.
You can tell what Jamie's worried about, Justine.
Want my content. Come on.
But, well, we've all gotten used to it, like we've all gotten used to this way of working and seeing now. And it was like quite novel at the beginning, and now it's like, But, having said that, actually in my film, we had such a crazy deadline, and we were filming while we were like finishing the film, like literally in the edit suite. And it wasn't because of COVID, but it was basically because of time. But, and I wouldn't have thought of this 6 months earlier, but Poppy's mum, the main character, I had to interview her, and I couldn't get there. So I sent up my DP. I was literally like this, working and like asking her questions over Zoom, and my DP was just able to film the answers. And you can't see that in the film because it's not part of it. But, it just shows you that you can get things done, I guess.
When you think outside the square.
I think it's really made things. Yeah, it's like, that's one of the creative things that you do, is like put restraints around what it is that you're trying to do and get more creative.
Of course.
And my film was also that, I was meant to be going to the Olympics in 2020 film, and that did not happen. The story changed like 2 months out.
Yeah.
So I guess on that point, what does the future look like for film and the TV industry as a whole? Do you think, like your example, you were supposed to go to the Olympics and you didn't. Do you think that there'll be less traveling, less remote shooting? And I guess I'm kind of thinking in the context of personal hesitancy. So you gave the example of Natalie, for example, but, do you think there'll be initially some hesitance from either stars or crew around doing what was the old practices moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think what it will do, what it's already done in Australia is, for instance, you're in Sydney, you've got your crew, we'll go to Adelaide, we'll go to Perth, we'll just take everyone and do it. And also because we all like traveling. And it also meant that a lot of the work that came out of like Sydney and Melbourne was kept to those people. But now this forced us to find people in all those places that are just as good as what we do.
Okay.
Learn to trust other people. So it's basically opened up the opportunity. I think if the cost of flights and accommodation doesn't go up too much in the next year, which I don't think it will, because they just want everyone to travel again, it means you can go either way, and it means that you don't feel like you necessarily have to take your crew if there's a cost factor, or just to be like, well, actually we've worked with these people and they can do the job. And sometimes that, depending on what it is, you do need the people that you've worked with, or just down to the cost factor, you've done a rate, which means that those people will do it less but more over more shoot days.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely, it's made us go, okay, well, what's possible and how do we make it work? And we can do it both ways, for sure.
Yeah. Opens up the network a lot.
Yeah, completely. And I mean, I think with bigger stars and crews that need to come from overseas, it's a bigger question. Like, I'm thinking about next year, and I'm like, well, if I do get an opportunity to go over to the States and work, do I want to do that? Because do I want to get stuck? Like, if that happens, like, those are, I think, are the bigger questions. One of my colleagues in advertising, like who runs the company, got stuck in Queensland and hasn't been back to Sydney in 4 months with his family.
Could be worse. Come on, it could be worse, right? You could
Yeah,
be stuck
that's
in
true.
Victoria
Very
and not be able to
true.
go. I'm stuck I'm stuck in the beach in the Whit Sundays. This is horrible. Sorry.
Yeah. And luckily we can do all those things remotely, but I think it's those questions for people on an individual level of like, what if I get stuck, am I okay with it? Do I want to sit on a plane with a mask for 24 hours full of people when we've been so used to not doing that? And people with the money, it's the same thing. They've still got to do that,
So just further to that, I mean, you're saying that you have to sort of, you don't take the crews that you would take, and particularly in Australia, but have you found that COVID's really enabled you to open up to the world? So do you do editing somewhere else in another country, or are you finding that, you are trusting further and outside of our borders? And is that, I mean, obviously on the time differences, do you go to bed and wake up and bang, that editing is being done? I don't know. Has that opened up those doors for you, or you probably haven't got to that level just yet?
It hasn't. I think it's always been like, aside from COVID, that's been a possibility over the last few years. I guess it's just made it, it's just like, I don't need to go to a conference and have a meeting with someone anymore. If that film conference is a $10,000 expense to get on a plane, go over, unless you want to really do it, people are willing to do it like this now. So in some ways it's made the world smaller in terms of not necessarily the work, but the people that you need to talk to in order to, whatever that product is at the end, you don't need to do that in person. They're more willing. We can have these conversations. It's not a big deal. No one's afraid of Zooming anymore. And so that makes it heaps more accessible, really. So much more accessible if you're looking at getting into those places. And I mean, editing is a different thing, because you need, that's a lot of, if you're looking overseas, it's a lot of file footage that you're talking about, getting from one place to the next, not necessarily overseas, but within Australia, like shoot the hard drives off, great. We're all used to that now. So we've all been working from home. Like, in production, it's not always easy depending on the size of the production, because you make a lot of decisions. You can work really quickly when you're sitting opposite each other, because you're hearing what's going on and you can just get on with it, as opposed to jumping on a call, doing this, or just missing what's being said. And also, like, if you're working with clients on the other side of editing, they can't and ah, because they're not sitting in an edit suite looking at it. They just give you, it's like, well, here's what needs to happen. This is the feedback. How do we move on? So it's efficiencies of scale around that as well. So there's been so many learnings you know, so many learnings. And I'd say like there's like in some ways just as much good as just as much challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
switching gears, Justine, I wondered whether and this is purely a selfish question, as a fan of movies, what do you think fans and viewers and consumers will expect from their entertainment options moving forward? So, and I'm kind of thinking along, you know, we've obviously all been conditioned to sitting on our couches and watching Netflix and the like, but do you think therefore the industry is now going to focus more on pushing releases directly to streaming services? You know, what impact does that have on cinemas, or can we still go to the cinemas when we can?
Yeah. It's an interesting one, that one, because I feel like it's actually elevated cinema to an even better experience. Like everyone's looking forward to it. And I think what it's doing is for us as filmmakers is like, well, how do we do it both ways, and how do we make it an experience at home? And it's making it more accessible at home, and it's also making it accessible at the cinema for sure. I think it's like I think it will all work still in different, and not necessarily in different ways. It's just like you'll just decide to consume it maybe more than once, or like in the instance of my film, a big part of it was having a Q&A at the end of it with Poppy. So we're going to do a couple more screenings at the end of the year, and Poppy's back from her trip. So the film's about Poppy, who's the skateboarder who went to the Olympics. And because people have already seen it, but they will come along because she's there to ask.
It's the next phase. Yeah.
It's the next phase.
Yeah, I like that.
So it's like, you know, what makes that a more interesting experience for people? And I'm the same. Like I would, if there's any film where there was someone that was from that film that I really enjoyed, I'd be like, for sure, I'll go and watch that at the cinema and be a part of that experience.
Yeah.
And then it's just for you as consumers, as filmmakers, like being aware of how people are consuming, where they're consuming, and making that cinema a special event. And then it's, you know, available online on the streaming service. I mean, the biggest problem with streaming services these days for all of us, I've seen a few comedians talk about it, where it's like, remember when there was like 5 channels and it was like, well, Monday night's this night and Tuesday night's this night. Now it's like you spend 2 hours like scrolling, being like, I don't know what to watch.
I tried to explain that to my children. Didn't work. You had to wait for your show? What?
Yeah, what do you mean? Like, I mean, what happened to the Sunday night, you know, movie? Like
the movie night, yeah.
I don't want to have to make any more choices in my life.
Or Friday night movies, I mean, this is the thing though, right? It's going to return the romance and the excitement and the special occasion to going to the movies. I think when I was a kid, it was a big deal. We'd go to the movies and, you know, Mum would pack us up in the car and off we go, and it was a big deal. And I think that people have got a bit not complacent, but a bit, you know, they're so used to it. But now I think they're excited. I mean, we did I went with the family in Darwin to a movie a few months ago, and there was no one in the cinema. It was just us. So it was myself, my wife, and my 3 kids, and it was so cool. I mean, the fact we had this whole cinema to ourselves was amazing, but just to actually go to the cinema again and sit there with the big screen, and, you know, it was such and I think you're right. I think people will run to that. I think. I mean, if you look at the way that, like, if you look at the way that music's gone over the years, like, you know, vinyl can come out at the same time as the streaming service, at the same time as the CD now, which is probably something, and like soon enough. And the merchandise.
And the merchandise, and go to the live event. Like it's all, it's like, I think it's a little bit of the Starbucks effect of like, it's all coffee, but how do you want to experience it?
Yeah.
You know, and you'll pay $2 or $5 or $6 or $7 for that coffee because it gives you a certain experience. And streaming parties, or like being like, oh, it's raining outside, but hey, why don't we jump on Zoom and we'll both watch it at the same time? Like, I don't know, just streaming parties. It gives you that opportunity, and things like conferences, like worldwide conferences. It means like no matter what industry you're in, there will always be an online component now.
And that feels like the big one to me as well. Like you're saying before, instead of paying $10,000 to get on a plane to go over to a conference, people are used to it now. I think at the start, and I know I was certainly one of the people who would prefer to look someone in the eye and face to face and have that human contact. And now I'm so like, I'm a bit sick of being on planes all the time, and I'm enjoying the fact that I don't have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to jump on a flight to go for a meeting. And I'm sure that the people who I'm meeting with are just the same. They're happy. You do the meeting, you knock off an hour, and then you're sort of done. You've saved yourself a lot of money and time. And
yeah, I think it's actually potentially, and for someone who loves traveling and like loves a $1,200 flight to LA or whatever it is, to be like, well, I can just jump on a plane next week.
Yeah.
It's bringing back the specialness of those opportunities, and like you'll still travel and still do it, but it's like actually instead of it just being like jumping in a car or going to a meeting, it's like, well, actually, how is my time best spent on this one? Or maybe, I will have this meeting in person because it's been 3 months and it's a bigger project and it will make more sense. But actually, I don't really need to do that. I mean, like meetings, like the amount of, we do less meetings. I love it. It's just like, just get on with it. And you're not sitting there talking shit for like half an hour, everybody like pats each other on the back. Like, well, let's use our time efficiently, thanks.
Meeting justifying the meeting,
Yeah.
What are we doing here? I'm trying to justify what I'm doing. It's like, come on, get on with it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
Happens a
who's
lot.
a superfluous person that's like just being like, yeah, this is my job. I'm like, no.
Isn't that a cuss cutting thing? Okay.
Justine, thank you so much. That was amazing. Some of those particular industry specifics I can see that they will be adaptable to the corporate world as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It was really enjoyable to talk to you guys.
Agree, Justine. I think it's great. I think, a lot of the stuff that we can take out of this, it just shows that the movie world isn't this, sort of special cohort that you live like we do, that you still got to go through these testings and, the rapid antigen tests and all that sort of stuff, and that you do have all the regular challenges just like the corporate world does, or like the rest of the world does. So yeah, it's been really insightful, and we've loved having you on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely, my pleasure.
All right, thanks so much, and good luck with the next film. I can't wait to hear what it's about, and I know you got to get through the current one first, but I'm sure you got another one in the pipeline.
Yeah, there's some ideas there.
We look forward to seeing them. Thanks, Justine.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.